Introduction. Herman Hesse's Siddharta, published in 1922, stands as one of the most influential spiritual novels of the 20th century. Written during a period of intense personal crisis and spiritual seeking in Hesse's own life, the novel draws deeply from his engagement with Indian philosophy, Buddhism, and his own psychoanalytic experiences with Carl Jung's disciples. The book tells the story of a young Brahmin named Siddharta who lives in ancient India during the time of Gautama Buddha. However, this is not the story of the historical Buddha himself, whose birth name was also Siddhartha Gautama. Instead, Hesse creates a fictional protagonist who embarks on his own unique spiritual journey, one that takes him through various stages of life and consciousness as he seeks to understand the nature of existence and achieve enlightenment. The novel is structured in two parts, each containing 6 chapters, creating a symmetrical architecture that mirrors the balance and harmony Siddhartha ultimately seeks. The first part follows Siddhartha's spiritual seeking through traditional religious paths, his life as a Brahmin son, his time with the ascetic Samanas, and his encounter with Gautama Buddha. The second part chronicles his immersion in the material world of sensual pleasure and commerce, followed by his eventual awakening through his relationship with the river and the ferryman Vasudeva. Throughout both parts, Hesse weaves together Eastern and Western philosophical traditions, creating a work that speaks to the universal human quest for meaning and self-knowledge. The novel's enduring power lies in its exploration of themes that transcend any particular religious tradition. The tension between seeking and finding, the relationship between knowledge and wisdom, the role of experience in spiritual development, and the ultimate unity underlying all apparent opposites. Hesse suggests that enlightenment cannot be taught through doctrines or achieved through any external path, but must be discovered through one's own lived experience. This radical emphasis on individual spiritual autonomy, combined with the novel's lyrical prose and profound psychological insights, has made Siddhartha a touchstone for generations of readers seeking their own paths to understanding. Part 1. Chapter 1, The Brahmin's Son. The novel opens in an ancient Indian town where Siddhartha, the handsome and beloved son of a Brahmin, grows up in the shadow of a great banyan tree. From his earliest years, Siddhartha has been raised in the highest caste of Hindu society, surrounded by the rituals, prayers, and sacred texts that form the foundation of Brahmin life. His father, a learned and respected priest, has devoted himself to ensuring that his son receives the finest spiritual education available. Siddhartha learns the sacred verses of the Vedas, practices the art of meditation, and masters the proper performance of religious ceremonies. He is taught to honor the gods, to purify his soul through ritual ablutions, and to seek the divine essence of Atman that dwells within all beings. Siddhartha's closest companion is Govinda, a young man who has attached himself to Siddhartha with the devotion of a shadow following its source. Govinda loves Siddhartha with an admiration that borders on worship, seeing in his friend a spiritual depth and potential that surpasses anything he finds in himself. The two young men spend their days together, bathing in the river during sacred ablutions, performing sacrifices, and engaging in the philosophical discussions that form the intellectual life of their community. Govinda is content to follow where Siddhartha leads, confident that his friend's wisdom will guide them both toward the truth they seek. Everyone in the town recognizes Siddhartha's exceptional qualities. His parents beam with pride at their son's accomplishments. The young women of the town cast admiring glances at this beautiful young Brahmin with his noble bearing and penetrating eyes. The other Brahmins respect his learning and recognize that he is destined for greatness. All who know him assume that Siddhartha will become a great priest, a prince among Brahmins, perhaps even a sage whose wisdom will illuminate the path for countless seekers. Yet beneath this surface of privilege and promise, a deep dissatisfaction stirs within Siddhartha's heart. Despite his mastery of the sacred texts, despite his faithful performance of every ritual, despite the love and admiration that surrounds him, Siddhartha feels a profound emptiness at the core of his being. He has learned everything his teachers can teach him, memorized every verse of the scriptures, perfected every technique of meditation, and yet the ultimate truth remains elusive. He knows the concept of Atman, the divine self that dwells within all beings, but he has not experienced it directly. He can speak eloquently about the unity of all existence, but he does not feel that unity in his own soul. The learned Brahmins around him seem satisfied with their rituals and their intellectual understanding, but Siddhartha senses that they too have not found what they claim to seek. This inner restlessness manifests as a growing skepticism about the traditional path. Siddhartha begins to question whether the endless round of prayers, sacrifices, and ritualistic observances can ever lead to true enlightenment. He observes his father, a man of impeccable devotion who has spent his entire life in the service of the gods, and wonders whether even this exemplary Brahmin has found the peace that transcends all understanding. When Siddhartha looks into his father's eyes, he sees wisdom and virtue, but he also sees a subtle sadness, an unfulfilled longing that suggests the elder Brahmin, too, continues to seek what he has not yet found. The sacred verses speak of Atman as the eternal, unchanging self that underlies all the transient phenomena of the world. They teach that this divine essence can be discovered through turning inward, through meditation and self-discipline, through the progressive stripping away of all that is not essential. But where is this Atman to be found? Siddhartha has searched for it in the depths of his meditation, in the precise performance of rituals, in the study of ancient wisdom, and yet it remains as distant as the stars. The knowledge he has acquired is like a map of a territory he has never visited, a description of a taste he has never experienced on his own tongue. One evening, as Siddhartha and Govinda rest beneath the banyan tree after their meditations, they learn that a group of wandering ascetics called samanas has been seen passing near the town. These samanas are radical seekers who have renounced all worldly possessions and comforts in pursuit of spiritual liberation. They wear rough garments or go nearly naked, subsist on the barest minimum of food, and subject their bodies to extreme mortification in their quest to transcend the prison of the flesh. They are outsiders to the comfortable world of Brahmin society, figures of both fascination and fear who represent a path that few have the courage to walk. For Siddhartha, the appearance of the samanas crystallizes a decision that has been forming in the depths of his consciousness. Here, perhaps, is another path, a more radical approach to the spiritual quest that might succeed where the gentle practices of Brahmin life have failed. The samanas have rejected everything the Brahmins hold dear: comfort, social position, the accumulated wisdom of tradition, in favor of direct confrontation with the raw facts of existence. Perhaps through their extreme practices, through the complete denial of the body and its desires, one can break through the barriers that separate the seeker from the truth. Siddhartha announces to Govinda his intention to leave his home and join the samanas. Govinda, though shocked, immediately declares that he will accompany his friend on this new path. Whatever Siddhartha does, wherever he goes, Govinda will follow. This is the nature of their friendship. Siddhartha leads, and Govinda follows, each fulfilling the role that seems natural to his character. The real challenge lies not in convincing Govinda, but in facing Siddhartha's father. The elder Brahmin has invested everything in his son's spiritual development, has dreamed of seeing Siddhartha become a great sage and teacher within their tradition. To have his son abandon this path for the radical asceticism of the samanas is almost unbearable. When Siddhartha announces his intention, his father refuses permission. He orders his son to go to bed and never speak of such things again. But Siddhartha will not be deterred. Throughout the night, he stands motionless in his father's house, his arms crossed, waiting in perfect stillness for his father to relent. Hour after hour passes as Siddhartha maintains his vigil, neither sleeping nor moving, his will as fixed as the stars in the heavens. His father rises several times during the night, sees his son standing there in the darkness, and returns to his restless bed. The dawn begins to break, and still Siddhartha stands, waiting. Finally, as the first light of morning illuminates the room, Siddhartha's father recognizes that he cannot hold his son against his will. With a heavy heart, he gives his blessing, asking only that Siddhartha return someday to teach him if he finds the bliss he seeks. Siddhartha bows respectfully to his father, touches his feet in the traditional gesture of filial devotion, and departs to begin his new life. Behind him, he leaves the comfortable world of his childhood, the love of his parents, the admiration of his community, and the carefully constructed edifice of his Brahmin education. Before him lies the unknown path of the wandering ascetics, a path of suffering and self-denial that promises nothing except the chance to seek the truth in a new way. This first chapter establishes the fundamental dynamic that will drive the entire novel: Siddhartha's relentless quest for direct spiritual experience and his willingness to abandon any path, no matter how comfortable or respected, that fails to deliver that experience. His departure from his father's house represents the first of many departures that will mark his journey. Each time Siddhartha masters a particular approach to life, he will feel compelled to move on, driven by an inner voice that refuses to accept anything less than the ultimate truth. This refusal to settle, this perpetual restlessness of the spirit, is both Siddhartha's greatest strength and his most significant challenge. Chapter 2, with the Samanas. Siddhartha and Govinda join the wandering Samanas and begin to learn their austere practices. The life of a Samana is one of extreme self-denial and mortification. These ascetics believe that the body is a prison for the soul, that sensual desires are chains binding the spirit to the wheel of suffering, and that only through the complete subjugation of physical needs can one achieve liberation. They wander through forests and villages, owning nothing, depending on occasional alms for sustenance, sleeping on the bare ground, and subjecting themselves to deliberate pain and discomfort as a means of transcending bodily consciousness. Under the guidance of the eldest Samana, Siddhartha throws himself into these practices with characteristic intensity. He learns to fast for extended periods, reducing his food intake until he subsists on almost nothing. He learns to endure extremes of heat and cold, standing motionless in the burning sun or immersing himself in icy water. He learns to slow his breathing almost to the point of death, to reduce his heartbeat to a barely perceptible flutter, to withdraw his consciousness so completely from his body that he seems to enter a state beyond life itself. He learns to ignore pain, to treat his body as an instrument rather than an identity, to punish the flesh in the hope of liberating the spirit. The goal of all these practices is the extinguishing of the self. The Samanas believe that the ego, with its endless desires and fears, its attachments and aversions, is the source of all suffering. If one can completely annihilate this ego, if one can achieve a state of perfect emptiness in which no self remains, then one will be free from the cycle of birth and death, liberated from the prison of existence. This state is described variously as emptiness, nothingness, or complete dissolution into the impersonal universal consciousness. Siddhartha proves exceptionally adept at the Samana practices. His natural discipline, his years of Brahmin training, and his fierce determination make him an ideal ascetic. He quickly masters techniques that take others years to learn. He can enter states of profound meditation in which his consciousness seems to leave his body entirely, wandering through other realms of existence. He learns the art of self-hypnosis, the ability to project his awareness into other beings, to experience life as a heron standing by the river, as a jackal prowling through the night, as a dead body rotting in the jungle. Through these experiences, he begins to understand the essential unity of all life, the way consciousness moves through countless forms while remaining fundamentally unchanged. Govinda follows his friend's progress with admiration, but cannot match Siddhartha's achievements. He practices diligently, endures the hardships without complaint, and makes steady progress on the Samana path. But he lacks Siddhartha's intensity, his driven quality, his almost desperate need to break through to ultimate truth. For Govinda, the Samana life is a path to follow, a discipline to practice. For Siddhartha, it is a means to an end, and if that end is not achieved, the means must eventually be abandoned. As the years pass, Siddhartha spends 3 years with the Samanas. His initial enthusiasm begins to give way to doubt. Despite his mastery of the ascetic techniques, despite his ability to achieve extraordinary states of consciousness, Siddhartha realizes that he has not found what he seeks. He can escape from his ego temporarily through fasting and meditation, but eventually, he always returns. The self that he has worked so hard to annihilate reasserts itself with all its old desires and fears. The peace he achieves in his deepest meditations dissolves when he returns to ordinary consciousness. He has learned to run away from himself, but he has not learned to transform himself. Siddhartha begins to compare the samana practices to intoxication. Just as a drunkard escapes from his problems temporarily through alcohol, only to find them waiting for him when he sobers up, so too the samana escapes from the self temporarily through ascetic practices, only to find the self waiting when the trance ends. These practices offer relief, not cure, escape, not liberation. The oldest samana, despite decades of practice, has not achieved the final goal. He too continues to suffer, continues to strive, continues to be bound by the cycle of existence. If such a master has not broken through after so many years, what hope is there that Siddhartha will succeed by following the same path? Moreover, Siddhartha begins to question the fundamental premise of the samana approach. Is it really possible to achieve wisdom through denial? Can one understand the nature of existence by running away from existence? The samanas treat the body as an enemy to be conquered, but is the body not also part of the great unity that includes all things? They seek to escape from the world of appearances, but is the world of appearances not also an expression of the ultimate reality? In trying so hard to reject what is, might they not be missing the truth that hides in plain sight? One day, Siddhartha expresses his doubts to Govinda. He argues that the samana path, like all paths that depend on technique and practice, can only produce temporary states. One can learn to escape from the self, but one cannot learn to become enlightened. Enlightenment, if it exists at all, must be something fundamentally different from any state that can be achieved through effort. The very striving for liberation may be what prevents liberation from occurring. As long as one is trying to get somewhere, one is not present where one is. Govinda is troubled by these thoughts, but remains committed to their current path. He argues that they have not yet exhausted the possibilities of the samana approach, that they should continue their practice before abandoning it. Siddhartha listens respectfully, but is not convinced. He knows in his heart that the samana path, however valuable it may be for developing discipline and concentration, cannot take him where he needs to go. Just as Siddhartha reaches this conclusion, news arrives that electrifies the community of seekers throughout India. Gautama, known as the Buddha or the Enlightened One, has appeared in the world. Unlike the countless teachers who claim wisdom, Gautama is said to have actually achieved final liberation, to have broken the cycle of birth and death, to have attained the state that all seekers are seeking. He is teaching in the town of Savatthi, and pilgrims from across India are flocking to hear his words. For Siddhartha, this news presents both an opportunity and a challenge. Here is someone who has apparently found what everyone else is seeking. Perhaps Gautama knows a secret, a technique, a path that Siddhartha has not yet discovered. Perhaps by sitting at the feet of an actual enlightened being, Siddhartha can learn something that will transform his own search. At the very least, he must see this Buddha with his own eyes, must judge for himself whether the claims about him are true. Siddhartha informs the eldest samana of his intention to leave. The old ascetic is displeased. Few people simply walk away from the samana path. But when he attempts to forbid Siddhartha's departure, something remarkable occurs. Siddhartha fixes the old man with his gaze and, using the powers of concentration he has developed, effectively hypnotizes the elder samana, compelling him to give his blessing. This demonstration of power is significant. It shows that Siddhartha has truly mastered the samana techniques, that he is leaving not because he has failed at their practices, but because he has succeeded and found them wanting. The elder samana, once released from Siddhartha's spell, grudgingly acknowledges the young man's accomplishment and lets him go. Siddhartha and Govinda depart from the samanas and set out toward Savatthi to encounter the Buddha. Behind them lies another abandoned path, another set of techniques mastered and found insufficient. Ahead lies the possibility of meeting someone who has actually achieved the goal that has eluded Siddhartha through all his years of seeking. This chapter deepens the pattern established in the first. Siddhartha is a seeker who will not be satisfied with partial answers, who demands nothing less than complete truth, and who is willing to abandon any path that fails to deliver that truth, no matter how much he has invested in it. Chapter 3. Gautama. Siddhartha and Govinda make their way to the garden of Jetavana, where Gautama Buddha resides with his community of followers. The journey takes them through the heart of India, and as they travel, they hear increasingly detailed reports about the Buddha and his teaching. Gautama, they learn, was himself once a prince who renounced his kingdom to seek enlightenment. After years of spiritual seeking, including a period of extreme asceticism, similar to that practiced by the Samanas, he finally achieved awakening while sitting beneath a bodhi tree. Since that moment of enlightenment, he has devoted himself to teaching others the path to liberation. His followers call him the Buddha, the Awakened One, and the Tathagata, the one who has thus gone to the other shore of existence. When Siddharta and Govinda arrive at Jetavana, they join a large crowd of seekers who have come to hear the Buddha speak. The community includes monks who have taken vows and live permanently with the Buddha, as well as lay followers who come to receive teaching and then return to their ordinary lives. The atmosphere is one of peace and ordered serenity. The monks go about their daily tasks with mindful attention, their movements unhurried, their expressions serene. Siddhartha immediately recognizes Gautama when he sees him. Despite the simple robes and the unassuming manner, despite the fact that the Buddha looks just like any other monk, there is something unmistakable about him. His movements possess a quality of perfect peace. His face radiates a calm that seems to come from somewhere beyond the ordinary human condition. Every gesture, every step, every breath seems to emerge from a center of profound stillness. Looking at this man, Siddhartha feels certain that here is someone who has genuinely achieved what all the seekers are seeking. Whatever Siddhartha may think about doctrines and teachings, he cannot doubt the reality of what Gautama has become. The Buddha delivers a teaching to the assembled community. His voice is calm and measured, his words precise and clear. He speaks of the Four Noble Truths: that life involves suffering, that suffering arises from craving and attachment, that liberation from suffering is possible, and that the path to liberation involves right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. He speaks of the middle way, the path that avoids both the extreme of sensual indulgence and the extreme of self-mortification. He speaks of the chain of causation that binds beings to the wheel of existence and the possibility of breaking that chain through wisdom and compassion. Govinda is deeply moved by the Buddha's teaching. Here at last, it seems to him, is the truth he has been seeking all his life. The Buddha's words have the ring of authenticity. His presence confirms the validity of his teaching. When the discourse ends, Govinda announces to Siddhartha that he intends to take refuge in the Buddha and join his community of monks. After all their years of seeking together, Govinda has found what he was looking for. He expects Siddhartha to join him. But Siddhartha, characteristically, holds back. He too has been impressed by the Buddha's teaching and, even more, by the Buddha's presence. He has no doubt that Gautama has achieved genuine enlightenment, that the peace radiating from this man is no pretense. Yet something prevents Siddhartha from following Govinda into the Buddha's community. Despite his admiration, despite his recognition of Gautama's achievement, Siddhartha senses that this path, however valid it may be for others, is not his path. That night, while Govinda sleeps among the Buddha's followers, Siddhartha lies awake wrestling with his decision. He knows he is about to lose his dearest friend, the companion who has followed him through every stage of his spiritual journey. Yet he also knows he cannot follow Govinda into the Buddha's Sangha. The reasons for this refusal are not entirely clear to him, but the feeling is unmistakable. Something in Siddhartha resists the idea of becoming anyone's disciple, of accepting any teaching secondhand, of following any path that has been laid out by another. Before leaving Jetavana, Siddhartha seeks a private audience with the Buddha. When the two men meet, Siddhartha speaks with remarkable frankness. He acknowledges the perfection of the Buddha's teaching, the flawless logic of the doctrine, the evident reality of Gautama's enlightenment. He does not question anything the Buddha has said, yet he must point out what seems to him a fundamental problem. The Buddha's teaching explains how he, Gautama, achieved enlightenment, but it cannot transfer that enlightenment to another person. Siddhartha elaborates his objection. The Buddha achieved his awakening not through following someone else's teaching, but through his own direct experience. He left his palace, tried various paths, rejected what did not work, and finally broke through to truth in his own unique way. The doctrine he now teaches is a description of his path, but each person's path must be their own. No teaching, however perfect, can substitute for direct experience. No words, however wise, can transmit the actual taste of enlightenment. The doctrine is like a finger pointing at the moon. It is not the moon itself. Moreover, Siddharta suggests there may be a gap or contradiction in the Buddha's teaching. Gautama teaches that all things are connected in an unbroken chain of causation, that nothing exists independently, that everything flows into everything else. Yet he also teaches that it is possible to escape from this chain, to achieve liberation, to reach a state called nirvana that lies beyond the cycle of cause and effect. How can there be an escape from a system in which everything is connected to everything else? Where does this nirvana come from if not from within the system of causation? Siddharta does not claim to have answered these questions, but he notes them as points where the doctrine seems to resist complete understanding. The Buddha listens to Siddhartha's words with perfect equanimity. He does not become defensive or argumentative. When Siddhartha finishes speaking, Gautama responds with gentle wisdom. He acknowledges that his teaching cannot transmit enlightenment directly, that each person must find their own way. He warns Siddhartha only to be wary of too much cleverness, too much thinking. The mind that analyzes and distinguishes can become a trap as surely as the mind that clings to pleasure or runs from pain. The Buddha wishes Siddhartha well on his journey, neither urging him to stay nor condemning him for leaving. This encounter with the Buddha marks a crucial turning point in Siddhartha's journey. For the first time, he has met someone who has genuinely achieved what he seeks. For the first time, he has encountered a teaching that he cannot simply dismiss as inadequate. Yet even faced with this authentic enlightenment, Siddhartha maintains his commitment to finding truth through his own experience rather than accepting it from another. This is not arrogance but integrity. Siddhartha knows that he must walk his own path, make his own mistakes, and discover his own truth, even if that path takes him far from the peaceful gardens of Jetavana. As Siddhartha walks away from the Buddha's community, leaving Govinda behind, he experiences a strange new awakening. Looking at the world around him, the trees, the sky, the river, the people passing by, he suddenly sees everything as if for the first time. The colors seem brighter, the sounds more vivid, the textures more alive. He realizes that for all his years of seeking, he has been trying to escape from the world rather than truly seeing it. He has been so focused on reaching some transcendent state that he has missed the wonder of immediate experience. Now, stripped of his role as a seeker, freed from the quest for enlightenment, he finds himself simply present to what is. This moment of awakening is subtle but significant. It points toward the ultimate resolution of Siddhartha's journey, when he will discover that the truth he seeks has been present all along in the ordinary world he has been trying to transcend. Chapter 4. Awakening. Walking away from the Buddha's grove, Siddhartha experiences a profound shift in consciousness. For the first time in his life, he is truly alone. Throughout his years of seeking, he has always been accompanied, first by the community of Brahmins, then by Govinda, then by the Samanas. Now Govinda has taken refuge in the Buddha, and Siddhartha walks on by himself, without a companion, without a teacher, without a path to follow. This solitude feels both terrifying and exhilarating. He has no idea where he is going or what he will do, but he is finally completely free. As he walks through the forest and countryside, Siddhartha begins to reflect on what he has learned and what he has yet to learn. His encounter with the Buddha has crystallized something that has been forming in his consciousness for a long time. All the teachings he has received, all the techniques he has practiced, all the paths he has followed have one thing in common: they have been attempts to escape from himself. The Brahmins sought to transcend the self through ritual and devotion. The Samanas sought to annihilate the self through asceticism. The Buddha's disciples seek to extinguish the self through following the Eightfold Path. In every case, the self is treated as the problem, the obstacle, the enemy to be overcome. But what if this approach is fundamentally mistaken? What if the self is not the enemy, but the very ground from which wisdom must grow? Siddhartha realizes that in all his years of seeking, he has learned many things about the world, about spiritual techniques, about philosophical doctrines, but he has learned almost nothing about himself. He has been so busy trying to escape from Siddhartha that he has never really become acquainted with Siddhartha. He knows the theories of Atman and Brahman, of emptiness and enlightenment, but he does not know his own heart, his own desires, his own nature. This recognition marks the beginning of what Siddharta calls his awakening, though it is a very different kind of awakening from what he had been seeking. He awakens not to some transcendent truth, but to the simple reality of his own existence. He awakens to the world around him, seeing it not as an illusion to be escaped, but as a miracle to be experienced. The leaves on the trees, the stones on the path, the clouds in the sky, all these things that he has walked past thousands of times without really noticing now appear in their full vividness and beauty. The world is not a prison, it is a garden of wonders. Siddhartha reflects on the meaning that his search has been seeking. He realizes that meaning is not something that exists out there, waiting to be discovered. Meaning is something that is created through engagement with life, through experience, through relationship. The Buddha found his meaning through his particular path, but that path cannot simply be copied by others. Each person must create their own meaning through their own unique engagement with existence. There are no shortcuts, no techniques that can substitute for the hard work of living. He also realizes that he has been afraid of life. All his spiritual seeking has been, at some level, a flight from the rawness and unpredictability of actual experience. The controlled environment of the Brahmin household, the rigorous discipline of the samanas, the peaceful community of the Buddha, all these have been ways of keeping life at a safe distance. But wisdom cannot be achieved by standing apart from life. It can only be gained by plunging into life fully, by experiencing everything that life has to offer, by saying yes to existence in all its forms. This insight fills Siddhartha with a strange new joy. For the first time, he feels truly present in his own life. He is not trying to be somewhere else to achieve some other state, to become someone different from who he is. He is simply here now, walking through the world as Siddhartha. And this simple fact, which had always seemed like a problem to be solved, now appears as a gift to be celebrated. He is alive. He exists. The world exists around him. What more could anyone ask for? Siddhartha thinks back on all the teachings he has received and realizes that they were not wrong, only incomplete. The Brahmins were right that there is a divine essence pervading all things, but they erred in thinking this essence could be approached only through scripture and ritual. The Samanas were right that the body can become an obstacle to spiritual growth, but they erred in treating the body as an enemy to be destroyed. The Buddha was right about the nature of suffering and the possibility of liberation, but his teaching could not convey the actual experience of awakening. Each of these paths contained truth, but each was also limited by its own assumptions and methods. Now Siddhartha determines to follow a path that no teacher has taught him, the path of experience. He will learn not from books or doctrines, but from life itself. He will learn from his own body, his own desires, his own pleasures and pains. He will learn from the river and the trees, from the animals and the people he meets. He will learn by doing, by making mistakes, by suffering the consequences of his actions. This is the only kind of learning that can transform a person from within. As this chapter closes, Siddhartha stands at a threshold. Behind him lies the world of spiritual seeking, with its teachers and techniques, its doctrines and disciplines. Before him lies the world of ordinary experience, with its pleasures and pains, its triumphs and failures. He is about to cross from one world into the other, from the life of the spirit into the life of the flesh. This crossing will take him far from the goals he originally set for himself, will lead him into experiences that would have horrified his earlier self. Yet it is a necessary part of his journey, a phase he must go through in order to integrate all the aspects of human experience into a complete understanding. The ascetic must become a sensualist before he can become whole. Part 2, Chapter 5. Kamala. Following his awakening in the forest, Siddhartha continues his journey until he comes to a great river. He spends the night beside the water, sleeping deeply and peacefully for the first time in many years. In the morning, a ferryman takes him across the river, and Siddhartha is struck by the man's simple, joyful presence. The ferryman, whose name is Vasudeva, tells Siddhartha that he has learned many things from the river and hints that Siddhartha too may one day come to learn from it. Siddhartha thanks the ferryman and continues on his way, but this brief encounter plants a seed that will flower many years later. On the other side of the river lies a different world. Siddhartha soon finds himself approaching a large city, a center of trade and pleasure very different from the forest communities he has known. Near the city's edge, he encounters a beautiful woman being carried in a sedan chair by servants. This is Kamala, the most famous courtesan in the city, renowned for her beauty, her wit, and her selectivity in choosing lovers. Only wealthy and refined men are admitted to her company. Something about Kamala captivates Siddhartha. Perhaps it is her beauty, which represents everything he has denied himself during his years of asceticism. Perhaps it is the challenge she represents, the entrance to a world he has never explored. In any case, Siddhartha determines that he will win Kamala's favor and learn from her the art of love. When he approaches her and declares his intention, she laughs at him. He is a ragged wanderer with nothing to offer. Why should she teach him anything? But Siddhartha is not deterred. He asks Kamala what he needs to do to become her student. She tells him plainly, he must have fine clothes, money, and gifts. He must become a man of the world, someone with status and resources. Only then will he be worthy of her attention. Siddhartha accepts these conditions and asks Kamala to recommend a way for him to acquire wealth. She suggests that he seek employment with Kamaswami, a wealthy merchant in the city, and she gives him a flower from her hair as a token of their future relationship. Before entering the city, Siddhartha transforms himself. He bathes thoroughly in the river, washing away the dust and grime of his wandering years. He visits a barber and has his hair cut and oiled. He obtains decent clothes to replace his beggar's rags. Looking at his reflection in the water, he sees a handsome young man with clear eyes and confident bearing, nothing like the gaunt, ash-covered Samana he had been. This external transformation mirrors an internal shift. Siddhartha is preparing to leave behind his identity as a seeker and take on a new identity as a man of the world. Siddhartha presents himself to Kamaswami and quickly impresses the merchant with his intelligence and composure. When asked what skills he brings, Siddhartha answers that he can think, wait, and fast. These abilities, developed during his years of spiritual training, may seem useless in the world of commerce, but Siddhartha proves that they are actually the most valuable skills of all. The ability to think clearly gives him an advantage in negotiations. The ability to wait gives him patience when deals require time to develop. The ability to fast gives him freedom from the desperate need that drives other men to make poor decisions. Kamaswami is impressed enough to take Siddhartha on as an assistant and potential partner. Under the merchant's guidance, Siddhartha begins to learn the ways of business. He travels to distant villages to buy and sell goods. He learns to negotiate, to assess value, to manage risk. He proves to be an excellent businessman, combining the analytical powers of his Brahmin education with the patience and discipline of his Samana training. Money begins to flow toward him, and his position in the city's commercial world grows steadily. With wealth comes access to Kamala. True to her word, she begins to teach Siddhartha the art of love. Their relationship is, from the beginning, a relationship of mutual education. Kamala teaches Siddhartha the pleasures of the body, the subtle arts of sensuality, the ways that physical love can be elevated to something approaching spiritual experience. She is a demanding teacher, insisting that Siddhartha learn to give pleasure as skillfully as he receives it, that he develop an awareness of his partner's needs and desires that matches his awareness of his own. For Siddhartha, this is entirely new territory. During his years of asceticism, he had treated his body as an enemy, suppressing its desires and punishing its needs. Now he is learning to inhabit his body fully, to experience pleasure without guilt, to enjoy the sensations he had so long denied. This is part of his education, his experiment in learning from life rather than from doctrine. He approaches sexuality with the same seriousness he once brought to meditation, seeking to understand its depths and possibilities. Yet Siddhartha remains, in some essential way, detached from the life he is leading. He engages fully in business and pleasure, but he does not identify completely with the roles he plays. He is like an actor who throws himself into a part while remaining aware that he is acting. Kamaswami notices this detachment and finds it frustrating. No matter how much Siddhartha earns, he never seems to care about money in the way a true merchant should. Kamala notices it too. Even in their most intimate moments, a part of Siddhartha seems to remain aloof, observing rather than fully surrendering. This detachment is both Siddhartha's protection and his limitation. It protects him from being completely consumed by the world of desire and acquisition. It allows him to maintain a perspective on his experiences, to learn from them rather than being lost in them. But it also prevents him from achieving the complete immersion in life that he sought when he left the Buddha's grove. He is still, in some sense, standing apart from experience, treating life as a lesson rather than simply living it. Kamala, perceptive woman that she is, recognizes that she and Siddhartha are alike in fundamental ways. They are both, she tells him, incapable of love. They can give pleasure and receive pleasure, can enjoy each other's company, can develop genuine fondness and respect. But true love, the kind that surrenders completely to another person, is beyond their capacity. They are too self-contained, too complete in themselves, too unwilling to merge their identities with another. This observation will prove prophetic, pointing toward the limitations that Siddhartha must eventually transcend. As the chapter closes, Siddhartha is established in his new life. He has wealth, status, and access to the finest pleasures the city has to offer. He has learned much about aspects of human experience that were completely foreign to him as a Brahmin and a Samana. Yet the careful reader can sense that this is not the end of his journey. The detachment that protects him also indicates that he has not yet found what he is truly seeking. The world of samsara, the cycle of desire and gratification, will hold him for a time, but it cannot hold him forever. Chapter 6. Amongst the people, years pass. Siddhartha becomes increasingly successful in the world of commerce. What began as a means to an end, acquiring wealth to gain access to Kamala, becomes an end in itself. He buys his own house, fills it with fine things, employs servants, and lives in a style befitting a prosperous merchant. His business dealings grow more complex and more lucrative. He becomes known throughout the region as a shrewd trader, a man whose judgment can be trusted and whose word is good. During this period, Siddhartha learns much about what he calls the childlike people, the ordinary men and women who make up the bulk of humanity. In his earlier life, as a Brahmin and a Samana, he had looked down on these people. They seemed to him like sleepwalkers, moving through life without awareness, driven by desires they did not understand, suffering from attachments they could not release. They were the ones who needed to be saved, while seekers like Siddhartha were the ones who would do the saving. Now, living among these people, Siddhartha begins to see them differently. Yes, they lack the spiritual awareness that seekers cultivate. Yes, they are caught up in the endless cycle of desire and gratification. But they possess something that seekers often lack: the ability to love. They love their children, their families, their friends with a wholehearted devotion that Siddhartha has never experienced. They suffer greatly when they lose what they love, but they also know a joy and fulfillment that comes from genuine connection with others. Siddhartha begins to realize that his spiritual pride had blinded him to the wisdom of ordinary people. He had thought himself superior because he understood concepts that they did not understand, because he could control his mind and body in ways they could not. But what good is all that understanding if it leaves you incapable of loving another person? What good is all that control if it cuts you off from the full range of human experience? The childlike people, for all their apparent ignorance, know something that Siddhartha has yet to learn. Yet even as he gains this insight, Siddhartha finds himself slowly losing the qualities that once set him apart. The detachment that protected him in his early years among the people begins to erode. He finds himself caring more about money, more about status, more about the pleasures that wealth can buy. He gambles extravagantly, throwing away in a single night what it took months to earn, experiencing the thrill of risk and the agony of loss. He drinks wine to excess, sleeps late in the morning, neglects his business. The transformation is gradual but relentless. What began as a conscious experiment in worldly experience becomes a trap. Siddhartha finds that he cannot easily return to his former state of detachment even when he wants to. The habits of indulgence have established themselves deeply. The appetites he awakened during his exploration of pleasure have become demanding masters. He has become, without quite realizing it, one of the childlike people he once observed with such detachment. Siddhartha begins to experience the suffering that comes from attachment. When business deals go badly, he feels genuine distress. When his pleasures are interrupted, he feels genuine frustration. When he loses at gambling, he feels genuine despair. These emotions are new to him. During his years of spiritual training, he had developed techniques to manage and suppress such feelings. Now those techniques no longer work. He is fully exposed to the raw impact of desire and disappointment. He also begins to feel a creeping disgust, both with himself and with the life he is leading. The pleasures that once seemed so exciting now feel repetitive and empty. The social gatherings that once entertained him now bore him. The accumulation of wealth that once motivated him now seems pointless. He sees the same patterns repeating endlessly: desire, acquisition, satisfaction, boredom, new desire. The cycle never leads anywhere. No matter how much he acquires or experiences, he is no closer to peace than when he started. Kamala observes these changes in Siddharta with concern. She cares for him in her way and sees that he is destroying himself. She notices that his hair is graying, that his face shows lines of dissipation, that his eyes have lost their clarity. The beautiful young seeker who came to her seeking instruction in love has become a tired, aging man caught in patterns of self-destruction. She does not know how to help him, and perhaps there is nothing she can do. Each person must find their own way out of the traps they create for themselves. This chapter represents the nadir of Siddhartha's journey. He has plunged fully into the world of experience, as he intended to do, but he has gone too far, stayed too long, and lost himself in the process. The detachment that was supposed to protect him has failed. The lessons he meant to learn have turned into addictions. He has become what he most despised: a person driven by desires he does not understand, suffering from attachments he cannot release. The spiritual seeker has become a spiritual failure. Yet even in this darkness, seeds of transformation are being planted. Siddhartha's very disgust with his current life is a sign that something in him has not been extinguished. The awareness that his pleasures are empty, that his pursuits are meaningless, that his life is heading in the wrong direction, this awareness is itself a kind of awakening. He may be lost, but some part of him knows he is lost, and that knowledge, painful as it is the beginning of finding his way back. Chapter 7. Samsara. Samsara, in Buddhist and Hindu thought, refers to the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth that characterizes ordinary existence. It is the wheel of suffering from which enlightened beings seek release. In this chapter, Hesse uses the term to describe the trap in which Siddhartha finds himself: the endless cycle of desire, pursuit, temporary satisfaction, and renewed desire that constitutes the life of the unawakened person. Siddhartha's descent into samsara continues and deepens. The disgust he feels with himself and his life does not lead immediately to change, but rather to further self-destruction. He gambles more recklessly than ever, seeking in the intensity of risk some escape from his pervasive boredom and self-loathing. He drinks more heavily, trying to drown the voice within him that insists his life is meaningless. He pursues pleasure with a desperate intensity that belies the emptiness he feels. Sometimes, in his darkest moments, Siddhartha thinks back to his former life. He remembers the young Brahmin who sat at his father's feet learning the sacred verses. He remembers the samana who could fast for weeks, who could project his consciousness into other beings, who could slow his heartbeat almost to stillness. He remembers the seeker who stood before the Buddha and refused to become a disciple because he valued his spiritual independence. What has become of that person? How did he transform into this aging sensualist who spends his nights gambling and drinking, who has lost all sense of purpose or direction? The memory of his former self is both painful and strangely comforting. Painful because it reminds him how far he has fallen. Comforting because it suggests that his current state is not his true nature, that somewhere beneath the layers of indulgence and self-destruction, the seeker still exists. But can that seeker be revived? Has Siddhartha gone too far, stayed too long in the world of samsara to find his way back? One night, after an especially excessive evening of gambling and drinking, Siddhartha has a dream. He dreams of a beautiful songbird that Kamala keeps in a golden cage. In the dream, the bird suddenly dies. Siddhartha takes its small body and throws it into the street. As he does so, he feels that he has thrown away everything good and valuable in his life. He wakes in a state of profound distress, covered in sweat, his heart pounding. This dream crystallizes something that has been forming in Siddhartha's consciousness. He understands, with sudden clarity, that he has been killing something precious within himself. The bird represents his spiritual nature, his capacity for awakening, his essential self. He has kept this self in a golden cage of pleasure and wealth, and now it is dying. If he does not act soon, it will be too late. He will become just another wealthy old man, living out his remaining years in comfort and emptiness, having forgotten that he ever sought anything more. The morning after the dream, Siddharta walks through the garden of his fine house and looks at the life he has built. The beautiful furniture, the elegant clothes, the well-trained servants, all of it suddenly seems like scenery in a play, props that have nothing to do with reality. He has been playing a role, the role of a successful merchant, and now the play is over. He cannot continue to perform this character any longer. Without saying goodbye to Kamaswami or even to Kamala, Siddhartha walks out of his house and out of the city. He leaves behind everything he has accumulated during his years as a merchant. The money, the property, the status, the relationships. He takes nothing with him except the clothes on his back. Once again, as he did so many years ago when he left his father's house, Siddhartha walks away from a life that has become a prison, heading into the unknown. He walks until he reaches the river, the same river he crossed years ago when he first entered the world of the people. Sitting by the water, exhausted and despairing, Siddhartha contemplates his life. He has tried every path: the path of the Brahmins, the path of the Samanas, the encounter with the Buddha, the life of the senses, and the marketplace. None of them have given him what he sought. He has failed as a seeker, and now he has failed as a man of the world. There seems to be no place for him anywhere, no path he can follow, no hope for redemption. Looking into the river, Siddhartha feels a powerful urge to end his life. The water flows by, cool and inviting. It would be so easy to simply slide beneath the surface and let the current carry him away. He would be free at last from the endless struggle, the perpetual disappointment, the weight of being Siddhartha. He leans forward, ready to embrace the final darkness. But at this moment, from somewhere deep within him, a sound rises. It is the sacred syllable Om, the word that represents the unity of all existence, the sound he learned as a child in his father's house. The sound seems to come not from his own consciousness, but from the depths of being itself. It penetrates his despair, reminds him of something he had forgotten, awakens something that had been sleeping. Siddhartha falls asleep on the riverbank, and when he wakes, he feels that something fundamental has changed. The despair has not disappeared, but it has been joined by something else. A sense that even in his failure, even in his fall, there is meaning. He has not wasted his years in the world of samsara. He has learned things that could not have been learned any other way. The experience of desire, of attachment, of suffering, these are necessary parts of the journey. Even his despair is part of the process that will eventually lead to awakening. When Siddhartha opens his eyes, he sees a man in a yellow robe sitting nearby. It is Govinda, his old friend, who happens to be passing through this area on his journey as a Buddhist monk. Govinda does not recognize the aging, disheveled man before him as his former companion. He has stopped only to watch over what he thought was a sleeping traveler, to ensure that no harm came to him in this vulnerable state. Siddhartha recognizes Govinda and feels a wave of affection for his old friend. He identifies himself, and Govinda is shocked to see what has become of the beautiful young Brahmin he once followed with such devotion. The two men talk briefly. Govinda tells of his years with the Buddha's Sangha, his continued search for enlightenment, his steady practice of the teachings. Siddhartha listens without judgment. He knows that his own path has been very different, that he has gone places Govinda has never gone and could not imagine. But he does not feel superior to his friend. If anything, he feels that Govinda's steadfast devotion contains a wisdom that his own restless seeking has lacked. After Govinda continues on his way, Siddhartha remains by the river. He has been saved from suicide, but he does not yet know what his life will become. He only knows that he cannot go back to the city, cannot return to his former ways. He must find a new path, but what that path might be remains completely unclear. The chapter ends with Siddhartha in a state of radical openness, empty of all his former identities, stripped of everything he once possessed, waiting for something new to emerge. Chapter 8. By the river. Siddhartha decides to stay by the river. He has nowhere else to go, no other path to follow, and something about this place feels right. The river, which he first crossed so many years ago, has become the setting for his rebirth. As he sits by the water day after day, he begins to listen to it in a way he never has before. The river seems to speak to him, though not in words. Its ceaseless flow, its endless variations with inconstancy, its patient journey toward the sea, all of these communicate something to Siddhartha that no teacher has ever communicated. After some time by the river, Siddhartha encounters Vasudeva, the ferryman who transported him across the river years ago. Vasudeva has aged but still possesses the same quality of joyful presence that struck Siddhartha at their first meeting. The ferryman lives simply, with almost nothing to his name, yet he radiates a contentment and peace that Siddhartha has never seen in wealthy merchants or learned priests. When Siddhartha asks if he might stay and learn from Vasudeva, the ferryman welcomes him without hesitation. Siddhartha becomes Vasudeva's apprentice in the art of ferrying. The work is simple, carrying travelers across the river, maintaining the boat, living in the small hut on the riverbank. After the complexity of his former life, the rituals of the Brahmins, the austerities of the Samanas, the intricacies of commerce, this simplicity feels like a blessing. Siddhartha learns to live in the rhythm of the river, rising with the sun, working through the day, sleeping deeply at night. But the real teaching comes not from the work but from the river itself. Following Vasudeva's guidance, Siddhartha learns to listen to the water with deep attention. At first, he hears only the obvious sounds: the splash of waves, the gurgle of currents, the whisper of water against the boat. But gradually, as his listening deepens, he begins to hear more. He hears 1,000 voices in the river, voices of joy and sorrow, voices of longing and fulfillment, voices of birth and death, all blending together into a great symphony of existence. The river becomes Siddhartha's teacher, revealing truths that no human teacher had ever conveyed. He learns that the river is always the same and yet always different. The water that flows past him now will never flow past again, yet the river as a whole remains unchanged. This teaches him something about the nature of time and identity. Everything changes constantly, yet there is something that persists through all changes. He learns that the river has no past and no future, only the eternal present. The water does not worry about where it came from or where it is going. It simply flows. The river lives entirely in the now, fully present to each moment, without regret for what has passed or anxiety for what is to come. This teaches Siddhartha something about the spiritual life. Perhaps enlightenment is not something to be achieved in the future, but something to be discovered in the present. He learns that the river encompasses all opposites within itself. It is one river and yet contains countless drops of water. It flows always toward the sea and yet is always returning through the cycle of evaporation and rain. It can be calm and violent, shallow and deep, warm and cold. All apparent contradictions are reconciled in the unity of the river. This teaches Siddhartha something about the nature of reality. Perhaps the opposites that seem to divide the world, good and evil, joy and sorrow, seeking and finding, are not really separate but aspects of a single whole. Vasudeva proves to be the perfect teacher for this stage of Siddhartha's journey precisely because he does not try to teach. He does not lecture or explain or demonstrate. He simply lives his life with full presence and attention, letting Siddhartha observe and draw his own conclusions. When Siddhartha asks questions, Vasudeva responds not with answers but with more observations, pointing Siddhartha back to the river, back to his own experience, back to the truth that cannot be conveyed in words. Sometimes Siddhartha and Vasudeva sit together in silence, listening to the river for hours without speaking. In these silences, Siddhartha feels a communion deeper than any conversation, a sharing of understanding that transcends language. He realizes that Vasudeva has found what all the seekers are seeking, but he found it not through seeking but through listening, not through striving but through opening, not through escaping from life but through fully inhabiting it. The years pass peacefully. Siddhartha ages but no longer minds the aging. His hair turns gray, his face becomes lined, but these changes do not disturb him. He is learning to accept everything that comes, to say yes to all of life, including the process of growing old and eventually dying. The acceptance that eluded him through all his years of seeking is beginning to take root in his heart. Yet Siddhartha's education is not complete. There is still one lesson he must learn, one part of himself that remains unredeemed. He has learned from the Brahmins and the Samanas, from the Buddha and the merchants, from Kamala and the childlike people, from Vasudeva and the river. But he has not yet learned the lesson of love, the complete opening of the heart to another being. This lesson will come, but it will come in a form he does not expect and through a pain he could not have imagined. Chapter 9. The Ferryman. Life by the river continues in its peaceful rhythm. Siddharta has become a skilled ferryman, able to read the currents and navigate the boat with expert ease. More importantly, he has become known among travelers as someone wise and gentle, someone to whom one can speak of troubles and find, if not answers, at least a sympathetic ear. Like Vasudeva, Siddharta has developed the art of listening not just to words, but to the silence between words, to the needs and sorrows that people carry beneath their spoken concerns. One day, a group of pilgrims approaches the river. They are followers of the Buddha, traveling to see their master before he dies. The news that Gautama is dying has spread throughout India, and his disciples are gathering to be with him in his final days. Among the pilgrims is a woman with a young boy, and Siddhartha recognizes the woman as Kamala. Kamala has changed greatly since Siddhartha last saw her. She has given up her life as a courtesan and become a follower of the Buddha, seeking the spiritual path that she had once found so foreign. But now, on this pilgrimage, she has been bitten by a poisonous snake. By the time the pilgrims reach the ferry, she is feverish and weak. She has only a short time to live. Siddhartha carries Kamala to the ferryman's hut and tends to her as best he can. In her final hours, they speak of their time together, the lessons they learned from each other, the strange paths their lives have taken. Kamala tells Siddhartha something he has not known. The boy with her is his son. She had conceived during their years together and raised the child alone after Siddhartha disappeared from the city. The boy's name is young Siddhartha. Kamala dies peacefully, with Siddhartha by her side. Despite the grief of her death, there is a rightness to her ending here, by the river, with the man who was her student and her lover. She has completed her own journey, moving from the life of pleasure to the life of the spirit, and now she returns to the unity from which all beings come. Siddhartha is left with his son, a boy of about 11 years old who does not know his father, who has been raised in luxury, and who is grieving the death of his mother. Young Siddhartha is willful, proud, and accustomed to having his way. He looks down on the simple life of the ferrymen and resents being forced to stay in their humble hut. He misses the city, the servants, the comfortable life he has known. Siddhartha's love for his son is immediate and overwhelming. For the first time in his life, he experiences the kind of unconditional love that he had observed in the childlike people but never understood. He wants to give his son everything to make him happy, to heal the wound of his mother's death. He tries to win the boy's affection through patience and kindness, hoping that time will soften young Siddhartha's resistance. But the boy will not be won over. He sees his father as a simple ferryman, nothing like the wealthy merchants and sophisticated people he has known. He mocks the humble dwelling, complains about the simple food, refuses to help with the work. When Siddhartha tries to teach him the wisdom of the river, the boy responds with contempt. When Siddhartha speaks of acceptance and patience, the boy screams that he wants to go back to the city. Vasudeva watches this struggle with compassion, but also with clarity. He sees that Siddhartha is trying to impose his own path on his son, that the father's love has become a subtle form of control. He gently suggests that perhaps young Siddhartha needs to find his own way, make his own mistakes, as his father did. Siddhartha listens, but cannot bring himself to let go. His love for the boy has become an attachment, a chain that binds him as surely as his former attachments to pleasure and wealth. One night, young Siddhartha runs away. He takes what money he can find, steals the ferryboat, and disappears into the night. When Siddhartha discovers that his son is gone, he is devastated. He wants to follow the boy, to bring him back, to protect him from the dangers of the world. But Vasudeva stops him. The boy has made his choice. He must be allowed to live his own life, even if that life leads him into suffering. This is the hardest lesson Siddhartha has ever had to learn. All his previous renunciations, leaving his father's house, leaving the Samanas, leaving the city, were choices he made himself. But to have something precious taken from him, to watch helplessly as his son walks away into a world of danger and pain, to feel the full weight of love that cannot protect what it loves, This is a suffering beyond anything he has known. Siddhartha remembers his own father, standing at the door as his son walked away toward the Samanas. Now Siddhartha understands what his father felt: the grief, the helplessness, the love that cannot hold on to what it loves. The wheel has come full circle. Siddhartha has become his father, and his son has become Siddhartha. Chapter 10. The Son. After young Siddhartha's departure, Siddhartha falls into a prolonged period of grief. He cannot stop thinking about his son, wondering where he is, whether he is safe, whether he is suffering. Every night, he hopes to hear the boy's footsteps returning. Every day, he scans the faces of travelers, hoping to see his son among them. His mind, which had grown so peaceful through years of listening to the river, becomes agitated and disturbed. Siddhartha recognizes that his grief is a kind of illness, that his attachment to his son has become an obsession that prevents him from being fully present to life. He knows intellectually that he should accept his loss, that clinging to what is gone only creates more suffering, that his son has the right to live his own life. But knowing these things intellectually does not heal the wound in his heart. The teachings he has received, the wisdom he has gained, seem powerless against this primal pain. Unable to find peace, Siddhartha one day walks into the forest, retracing the path his son took when he ran away. He walks and walks, driven by a hope he knows is foolish, that somehow he will find the boy and bring him back. Eventually, he reaches the outskirts of the city where he once lived with Kamala. He stands at the edge of the town, looking in at the streets where he walked as a young man, where his son probably walks now. At that moment, something shifts in Siddhartha's consciousness. He sees himself standing there, an aging man sick with love and longing, unable to let go of his son. And suddenly he sees his own father, standing at the door of their house so many years ago, watching Siddhartha walk away toward the Samanas. He sees that his father must have felt exactly what he feels now: this terrible love, this helpless watching, this wound that cannot be healed by any act of will. The recognition breaks something open in Siddhartha. For the first time, he truly understands his father, not intellectually but in his heart, in his body, in the very cells of his being. He understands that his father's love was not a weakness or a limitation, but a genuine expression of the deepest truth of human existence. Love cannot hold on to what it loves. Life flows forward like the river, carrying everything away, and love must learn to let go even as it continues to love. Siddhartha returns to the river. His grief has not disappeared, but it has been transformed by this insight. He begins to understand that his suffering over his son is not separate from the suffering of all beings. Everyone who loves experiences this pain of separation, this wound of attachment. The mother loses her child, the lover loses the beloved, the friend loses the friend. This is not a problem to be solved, but a truth to be accepted, an aspect of existence as fundamental as the flowing of the river toward the sea. He also begins to understand something about the nature of love itself. His love for his son, which had seemed like a trap, a source of suffering, is actually a gift. Through this love, Siddhartha has finally experienced what the childlike people experience, what he had observed but never understood. He has become one of them, joined the community of all beings who love and suffer, and continue to love despite their suffering. This is not a lesser state than the detachment of the enlightened. It is perhaps a higher state, a fuller embrace of human existence. The wound of his son's departure remains with Siddhartha, but it becomes, over time, less an affliction and more a companion. He carries it with him as he goes about his work, feels it when he sees fathers with their sons crossing on the ferry, accepts it as part of who he has become. The wound keeps him human, keeps him connected to the suffering of others, prevents him from ascending to some elevated state that separates him from ordinary life. Vasudeva observes Siddhartha's transformation with quiet satisfaction. He has watched many people come to the river to heal, has seen how the water works its mysterious medicine on wounded hearts. He knows that Siddhartha is nearing the end of his long journey, that the final pieces are falling into place. But he says nothing, does nothing. The river will do what the river does. His work is simply to be present, to ferry people across, to listen. Chapter 11. Siddhartha's grief over his son gradually transforms into a deeper wisdom. As he continues to listen to the river, he begins to hear new things in its voices, things he had not heard before, things that were perhaps always there, but required his own suffering to make audible. The river speaks of the unity of all existence, of the way that all separate streams eventually flow together into the sea, of how what seems divided is actually one. One evening, Siddharta sits by the river in a state of deep contemplation. The wound of his son's departure has not healed, but it has become part of him, integrated into his being rather than standing apart as an affliction. As he listens to the water, he begins to hear voices, thousands upon thousands of voices, the voices of all beings who have ever lived, who are living now, who will ever live. Each voice speaks its own story of joy and sorrow, of seeking and finding, of love and loss. He hears the voice of his father, mourning his departure so many years ago. He hears the voice of Kamala, laughing in pleasure and then crying out in the pain of death. He hears the voice of his son, angry and confused, walking away into the unknown. He hears his own voice at every stage of his journey. The proud young Brahmin, the austere Samana, the seeker questioning the Buddha, the merchant lost in pleasure, the despairing man ready to drown himself, the ferryman learning to listen. All these voices are present in the river, all these stories are flowing together toward the sea. As Siddharta listens with complete attention, something remarkable happens. The 1,000 voices begin to merge together, blending into a single great sound. This sound encompasses all the joy and all the sorrow, all the birth and all the death, all the seeking and all the finding. It is the sound of existence itself, the voice of everything that is. And this sound, Siddhartha realizes, is Om, the sacred syllable that contains all other sounds, the word that represents the unity underlying all apparent diversity. In this moment, Siddhartha achieves what he has sought his entire life. But it is not what he expected. It is not an escape from the world, but a complete embrace of the world. It is not a transcendence of suffering, but an acceptance of suffering as part of the whole. It is not a rejection of the self, but a recognition that the self is both absolutely real and absolutely illusory, that Siddhartha is a unique individual and also an expression of the universal consciousness that flows through all things. He understands now why he could not become a disciple of the Buddha. The Buddha's teaching described the path to enlightenment, but the path itself cannot be walked by following someone else's directions. Each person must find their own way, make their own mistakes, experience their own suffering. The teaching can point toward the truth, but only experience can reveal it. Siddhartha needed to live through all the stages of his journey, the seeking and the finding, the pride and the despair, the pleasure and the pain, the love and the loss, in order to arrive at this moment of understanding. He understands now why Vasudeva has been such a perfect teacher. Vasudeva did not try to transmit his wisdom through words or concepts. He simply lived his wisdom and let Siddhartha observe. He pointed not to doctrines, but to the river, not to explanations, but to experience. And he waited, patiently, for decades, knowing that his student would eventually hear what the river had to say. Siddhartha turns to look at Vasudeva and sees that the ferryman is watching him with a smile of infinite gentleness. The old man's face seems to glow with a light that is not of this world. Siddhartha realizes that Vasudeva has been where he is now, has heard what he is hearing, has understood what he is understanding. No words need to be spoken between them. Their communion is complete. Vasudeva speaks at last. He says that he has waited for this moment for many years. He says that the river has shown Siddhartha its secret, and now Siddhartha is ready to take his place as the ferryman. Vasudeva himself is ready to leave, to walk into the forest, to return to the unity from which all beings come and to which all beings return. Siddhartha watches as Vasudeva walks away into the forest, his yellow robe disappearing among the trees. He feels no sadness at this parting, only gratitude and love. Vasudeva has completed his work. His time as ferryman is finished. Now Siddhartha will carry on, ferrying travelers across the river, listening to the water, waiting for those who are ready to hear what the river has to say. Chapter 12. Govinda. Many years have passed since Vasudeva walked into the forest. Siddhartha has grown old, his hair white, his face deeply lined. Yet there is a radiance about him that travelers notice, a quality of peace and presence that draws people to seek his counsel. Rumors have spread about the wise ferryman on the river, and pilgrims sometimes make long journeys just to meet him. One day, an elderly Buddhist monk approaches the ferry. He is making a pilgrimage, as he has made so many pilgrimages during his long life of seeking. He has heard about the wise ferryman and wishes to spend the night in his company before continuing his journey. The monk is, of course, Govinda, Siddhartha's childhood friend, who has remained faithful to the Buddha's teaching for all these decades. Govinda does not recognize the old ferryman. Too many years have passed, too much has changed. He sees only a peaceful old man who welcomes him warmly and invites him to stay the night. They speak of many things as the evening darkens: the river, the nature of the spiritual path, the search for enlightenment. Govinda is impressed by the ferryman's wisdom and wonders where he could have learned such things. Finally, Govinda asks the ferryman directly, what has he learned in his life? What wisdom can he share? What is the secret of his evident peace? Siddhartha smiles at these questions. They are the questions he himself asked so many times during his years of seeking. He tries to answer, but he finds that the truth he has discovered cannot be easily put into words. Siddhartha explains that he is suspicious of teachings and doctrines. Words can describe experience but cannot convey it. Concepts can point toward truth but cannot capture it. Whatever wisdom he has gained has come not from teachings but from life itself, from the river, from the experience of pleasure and pain, from the wound of loving his son, from simply paying attention to what is. He does not reject the Buddha's teaching, he honors it as a valid expression of truth. But he knows that truth cannot be transmitted through words alone. Govinda listens with growing frustration. He has devoted his entire life to the Buddha's path, has practiced diligently, has tried to extinguish his desires and attachments, and yet final enlightenment still eludes him. He is an old man now, and he fears he will die without achieving the goal he has sought for so long. Can this ferryman, who has apparently found peace through such an unconventional path, offer him nothing more specific, nothing more practical? Siddhartha tries another approach. He speaks of the unity of all things, of how the world is perfect in every moment, of how every stone, every flower, every person is an expression of the divine. He speaks of how time is an illusion, of how the sinner is already a Buddha, of how the Buddha already contains within himself the future sinner. All things exist simultaneously. All paths lead to the same destination. All seekers are already what they are seeking to become. But Govinda cannot understand. These words sound like paradoxes, even like nonsense. How can the sinner be a Buddha? How can seeking be the same as finding? How can time be an illusion when we so clearly age and die? Govinda has spent his life trying to understand the Buddha's teaching, and these new formulations seem to contradict everything he has learned. Seeing Govinda's confusion, Siddhartha tries one final approach. He tells Govinda to come closer, to look at his face. As Govinda leans in, something extraordinary happens. The old ferryman's face begins to transform before Govinda's eyes. He sees not one face but countless faces, one flowing into another like the waters of a stream. He sees the face of a fish, the face of a murderer, the face of a god, the face of a lover, the face of a dying woman, the face of Siddhartha as a young man, the face of the Buddha himself. He sees all the faces of existence, all the joy and suffering, all the birth and death, all flowing together in one continuous stream. And behind all these faces, beneath all these transformations, Govinda sees a smile of unity, of peace, of perfect acceptance. It is the same smile he once saw on the face of the Buddha. It is the smile of one who has seen through the illusion of separateness and recognized the oneness of all existence. It is a smile that judges nothing, rejects nothing, excludes nothing from its embrace. Govinda is overcome. Tears stream down his face as he bows before his old friend, now revealed as one who has achieved what all seekers seek. The words that could not convey truth have been transcended. In this moment of direct perception, Govinda glimpses what Siddhartha has discovered. The vision fades, but Govinda knows that he has seen something real, something beyond the power of doctrine to describe. Govinda kisses Siddhartha's forehead, a gesture of reverence and love that bridges all the years of their separate journeys. Then he rises, turns, and continues on his pilgrimage. But something has shifted in him. The vision he has seen will remain with him, working its slow transformation, opening possibilities that his years of disciplined practice had never opened. Siddhartha remains by the river, the smile still on his face. He has completed his journey, though he knows that in a deeper sense, the journey never ends. Life continues to flow like the river, bringing new travelers, new stories, new opportunities for listening and learning. He is old, and one day soon he will die, returning to the unity that underlies all existence. But for now, he simply sits, watching the water flow, listening to its thousand voices, at peace with everything that is. Conclusion and themes. Herman Hesse's Siddharta concludes with a profound affirmation of the spiritual journey as a process that cannot be shortcut or borrowed from another. Throughout the novel, Siddharta tries various paths: the ritualism of Brahmin practice, the extreme asceticism of the Samanas, the teachings of the Buddha, the indulgences of the material world, and finally the patient listening of the Herman. Each of these stages contributes something essential to his ultimate understanding, and none of them could have been skipped. The novel's central insight is that wisdom cannot be transmitted through teaching. The Buddha achieved genuine enlightenment, and his teaching accurately describes the path he took and the truth he discovered. But Siddhartha cannot become enlightened by following the Buddha's instructions, any more than one can become satisfied by watching someone else eat. Each person must walk their own path, make their own mistakes, and discover truth through their own experience. The teacher can point the way, but the student must do the walking. This does not mean that teachers are useless or that all paths are equally valid. Siddhartha learns something valuable at every stage of his journey. The discipline of the Brahmins teaches him concentration and reverence. The austerities of the Samanas teach him to transcend his body's demands. The Buddha shows him that enlightenment is genuinely possible and gives him a model of what a realized being looks like. The life of pleasure and commerce teaches him the dangers of attachment and the depths of his own desires. Kamala teaches him about love and the body. His son teaches him about the pain of attachment and the necessity of letting go. Vasudeva and the river teach him to listen, to accept, to see unity in diversity. The symbol of the river carries much of the novel's meaning. The river is always changing, yet always the same. It flows in one direction, yet returns through the cycle of rain and evaporation. It is composed of countless drops, yet forms one continuous stream. It encompasses all opposites within itself: depth and shallowness, stillness and movement, past and future. By learning to listen to the river, Siddhartha discovers a wisdom that transcends all doctrines, the wisdom of direct perception, of seeing reality as it is rather than as concepts describe it. Another crucial theme is the relationship between knowledge and wisdom. Siddhartha accumulates vast knowledge during his years of study and seeking, but knowledge alone does not bring peace. Wisdom comes only through the integration of knowledge with experience, the transformation of intellectual understanding into lived reality. One can know that attachment causes suffering without being free from attachment. One can understand the concept of unity without experiencing it. The journey from knowledge to wisdom is the journey Siddhartha takes. The novel also explores the tension between the spiritual path and ordinary human life. The traditional view, represented by the Samanas and to some extent by the Buddha's monastic community, holds that spiritual development requires renunciation of worldly concerns. Siddhartha's own journey suggests something different, that one must embrace life fully, including its pleasures and pains, before one can truly transcend it. His years of indulgence were not a detour from his spiritual path, but an essential part of it. The wound of losing his son was not an obstacle to enlightenment, but a doorway into deeper understanding. The character of Govinda serves as a foil to Siddhartha throughout the novel. While Siddhartha must question, rebel, and find his own way, Govinda is content to follow, first following Siddhartha, then following the Buddha. His path is more conventional, more obedient, more in accordance with traditional spiritual teaching. Yet even after decades of dedicated practice, Govinda has not achieved what Siddhartha achieves. This suggests that the capacity for independent thought and the willingness to question received wisdom are essential to spiritual development. Love emerges as a central theme, particularly in the novel's second half. Siddhartha's inability to love is identified early on, both by himself and by Kamala. His years of seeking have made him self-sufficient, able to think, wait, and fast, but unable to open his heart completely to another being. The experience of loving his son, and especially the pain of losing him, finally breaks down this barrier. Through the wound of love, Siddhartha joins the community of ordinary human beings and discovers a truth that his spiritual pride had hidden from him. The novel's conclusion offers a vision of enlightenment that differs from traditional Buddhist descriptions. Rather than an escape from the world of appearances into some transcendent realm, Siddhartha's awakening is an embrace of the world in all its aspects. He sees the unity underlying all apparent diversity, the perfection present in every moment, the Buddha nature in every being. Time ceases to be a prison, all moments are equally present. Opposition ceases to be real, all opposites are reconciled in the unity of existence. The sacred syllable Om, which represents this unity, is heard in the voices of the river, which contains all the voices of creation. Hesse wrote Siddhartha during a period of profound personal crisis, and the novel reflects his own struggle to integrate Eastern and Western spiritual traditions, to find a path that honored both the wisdom of the East and the individualism of the West. The result is a work that speaks to seekers of all backgrounds, offering not a doctrine to follow, but an inspiration to seek one's own truth. Like the river that teaches Siddhartha, the novel points beyond itself to a reality that words can only hint at, a reality that each reader must discover for themselves through the patient work of living. The smile that Govinda sees on Siddhartha's face at the novel's end is the same smile that rests on the face of the Buddha, the smile of one who has seen through the illusion of separateness and rests in the unity of all things. This smile judges nothing, excludes nothing, rejects nothing. It embraces all of existence, including the suffering and the joy, the seeking and the finding, the loss and the love. It is the smile of completion, the smile of one who has arrived home after a long journey and discovered that home was always where they stood. This is the final teaching of Siddhartha, that what we seek is not somewhere else, not in the future, not in some transcendent realm beyond this world. What we seek is here now, in the ordinary miracle of existence itself. The river flows, the ferryman listens, and the smile of enlightenment shines on all who have eyes to see it.